Okay, this is going to be about my Memorial Day video about World War One. We've lost the last person that was born in the 1800s is dead. The last World War One vet has died several years ago. There's not that many people who are even alive in 1918. It's dwindling obviously every day. So I want to make some stuff aware that, because to the victor go the spoils. And a lot of stuff people, when you win, you want to put out of your mind about how you won and the cost of it. So here's a map of World War One, and all along the sides, got the combat divisions that participated here. I'll do it slow so you can go back in time and see and freeze it. You're hardly going to find a map like this anywhere without paying a little bit of money for it. So I'm going to go there and so if you had a great grandfather, hopefully you can get close enough on these war insignias to find out some history of it. So anyway, Lord Kirchner was the one that said the army with the last million people or the last million soldiers is going to win the war, and so they were trying all the way they could to get the U.S. involved, because we were outside of the war. We had a large, healthy population, and the plan the English had was to bring us in and help wipe out the Germans at the end. And to that fact, a lot of people think we got involved in Germany because of the sinking of the Lusitania. That was a thing that got us teetering on going in. But remember, before that, we were selling and making money selling to both the English and the Germans. As a matter of fact, a German U-boat landed several times. They had a big, giant cargo U-boat to pick up shipments of rubber and nickel and all kinds of stuff. And the German officers would sometimes go to Washington, and people would push their daughters on them, because initially it looked like Germany was going to win the war, but then the opposition hardened. There was a bunch of bombs went off in Washington D.C., and the Germans, whether they did it or not, they got blamed for it. So a lot of people think the Lusitania got us into World War One, but it really wasn't. The final blow was the Zimmermann telegraph. And that's what really got us into World War One. And so here's a picture of the actual notice. Travelers intending to embark on an Atlantic voyage, basically telling you you're on a British liner. And here's it was the German embassy that took out the ad. And when the Lusitania got hit, it blew up epically because it had munitions in it. I mean, it just it went down fast, and there was a bunch of secondary explosions, way more than would be on a passenger ship. So it had stuff in it. So they were warned. They just chose to do it that way. And I don't know if it was they were hoping something like this would happen to get us in the war. But anyway, that was the outcome of it. And there was a whole lot of technological advancements in World War One. Obviously, the airplane had just been invented, and initially it was basically just an observation craft. A matter of fact, the French were fixing to give up, and then this young lieutenant went on board. I believe it was a Vickers, and he took some photographs and showed them that they had kind of abandoned the Schliemann plan and split some of the forces down to Alsace-Lorraine. And I covered this in one of my videos on one of my YouTube accounts. Just punch in the Schlieffen plan. And they didn't commit to the Schlieffen plan wholly like they were supposed, like the plan was. They split the forces a little bit. So France held on simply because, and the lieutenant went up to these generals and field marshals and told them, and they go, well, you really don't know what you saw. And he got some people to listen to him, so they bucked up, and they instead of collapsing, they held on. And so that was the observational aircraft that kind of saved World War One, for, you know, saved France from being overcome. But if you look at the evolution of the aircraft in World War One, by the end of the war, they had these long-range bombers. Here's one you don't ever see, the Zeppelin Strachan, and it had both a pusher and a puller propellers on it. And then here's the famous Handley Page. And so, you know, as the war carried on, the synchronized machine guns came out that would fire between the propellers to make it easier to hit. The ones up here, obviously, like this one had a pusher propeller and open, and then some of them fired. You know, they had a machine gun mounted over, so you wouldn't even. You had to fire over the propeller blades, and then the Germans invented the synchronized machine guns that would fire between the propeller blades, and that lasted. That big advance lasted for a short time till a German plane finally crashed, and they learned about synchronizing the guns. And here's a reproduction of a World War I poster in America. So they say, you know, don't let this brute come in. And they have, obviously, he's got the Pickelhaube helmet, that he's a Hun, and you know. So here's some, I'm going to do a whole book on I'm going to do a whole video just on the here's another one. Buy U.S. Remember the flag of liberty and support it. Buy U.S. government bonds. And this is going to segue into the rest of the video, which I really want to talk about, which was the breakout of the Spanish flu that happened. Now, I'm just going to throw this out there because I do have the war bond, the Liberty Bond reproduction of, remember, and buy U.S. war bonds. So there was an event in Philadelphia after the outbreak of the Spanish flu, and the papers even talked about it. Everybody was coughing during it, and there was an outbreak just right around there of the Spanish flu that killed 3,000 people just then. And so let's just kind of go over the numbers of the people that died of the Spanish flu. 1 month in the U.S. of 1918, 195,000 people died of it. Now, it was called the Spanish flu, the Spanish avian flu, the Spanish influenza. It was also called the Spanish lady and the gripe. 60 million people died worldwide of H1N1. Now, they're always watching for threats of the H5N1 and the H5N7 outbreak, and you can track outbreaks in real time at a website called Recombonics. And what was the end sum of the outbreak of the influenza? Remember, as many people died pretty much of that as died of the Black Plague. So it helped push the Treaty of Versailles through. And there's the war bond rally I just mentioned, and that was, you know, those were the posters from that rally. And just parallels about, before I go on to the final part of where I think the Spanish flu came from, during the outbreak of the Black Death, Jews were thought to be, sorcerers, because the Jewish, you know, basically enclaves and ghettos and all these little walled cities at the time during the outbreak of the Black Death, they didn't suffer as much, mainly because they followed the guidelines about infected people and leprosy. If you look in Leviticus, and people say, well, that was too long ago for bacteriological warfare. Well, you know, George Washington gave blankets to the Indians from people that had died of smallpox during the Indian Wars. So, you know, they may not have understood the mechanism of it, but they understand they understood what the effect was going to be. I know tons of people that operate stuff every day. They have no clue how it works. But anyway, so let's go over the outbreak of the Spanish flu. The zero patient was a guy named Albert Gitchell, and he was at Fort Riley, Kansas, Camp Funston, and he was patient zero. Now, there's a theory that the outbreak was caused from burning horse manure at Fort Riley, Kansas. They had a big polo field there. I mean, George Patton used to play polo there when he was stationed there in World War I, or before World War I. But he was cleaning pig pens, and he was locked in a train with a bunch of chickens for about a whole day, ostensibly to clean it out. But they decided to use him to start this, and then and he was a cook there at Camp Funston, Fort Riley, and within hours of him developing symptoms, hundreds of people were ill. So most flus come from two areas of the world. They come from Central Africa, and they come from Southeast Asia. And the reason being is the people are in close proximity to the poultry. They live with the chickens, are in close contact with the chickens. But I'm going to tell you something that, since I'm probably one of only maybe 40 people in the world that ever bothered to read stuff like this, there was a Berlin Bacteriological Conference back in 1944, and a German general named Schreiber said he spent 2 months in the U.S. studying at a university in 1927, and he was told that the Spanish flu was developed and it was designated the double blow virus in 1914. And that's when it was initially created. And you could create it basically anytime you wanted. You had to use a younger man. Reason being, infants and young people died heavy-ended wise because of it, because of a thing called a cytosine storm, and it's come from a very fast and strong immune system. And another little thing I want to throw in there was an Irish prophet named Saint Malachy, and he died in the arms of Saint Bernard. Yeah, that's Saint Bernard. And he had a line for the Pope reigning during World War I called Religia de Popula, the death of religious people. And percentage-wise, the largest number of Christians died in World War I. And what was the final outcome of World War I? Well, it actually helped blacks move out of the South to fill factory jobs in Detroit, Philadelphia, New York, and Pittsburgh. They were still in the South till that time. The U.S. obviously made a lot of money. It set the stage for World War II. It deposed 3 imperial dynasties: the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Romanov. It started communism and the Stalin Purge, which resulted in 40 million people death, and Mao, which resulted in 40 million death. And communism, like I see these idiots wearing these Che Guevara shirts, just to throw that in there, Che Guevara personally ordered the death of 200 people. So next time, just wear a Hitler shirt instead of a Che Guevara shirt. Thanks, I'm out.